Morning.
Morning. I was watching a couple of these videos last night, and I noticed that I start all of them with, "Good morning, how's everybody doing?" and then walk over here and sit on the counter. And so I'm going to do something different and stand over here this morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Good. So, how many people know what we're talking about? Because that's the other thing I noticed is I watched a few of these. Sometimes I even brought a prop to remind everybody. So, show of hands, how many people know what we're talking about today? Okay, good. All right. Somebody shout it out.
Buyer process.
Buyer's process, exactly. So, we're going to go through the buyer process, and we're going to go through the whole process. That's kind of hard not to come off.
See, someone does read your emails.
That's a good thing. All two people. All right, so let's talk in general overview about the buyer process. What's the first step in the buyer process?
Getting a buyer.
Getting a buyer.
Right.
That's a great question.
And how do we get a buyer there, Rob?
Well, there are many ways to do that. Starting with, as many of us have learned, e-leads and prospecting and networking and doing all the other
Open
things.
houses.
Open houses.
But again, what's an open house? Open house is an opportunity for prospecting, right? Because prospecting, no matter what, even e-leads are just an opportunity for prospecting. You're just a little further down the path. The difference between calling expireds and calling random people on a street is that at least the expireds have expressed some interest in doing something real estate related, right? So you're just a little further down the process, your conversion rate might be higher. But other than that, it's all the same, right? So after we get the buyer, what's the first thing we need to do with the buyer?
Get them to sign an agreement.
Well, where are we going to get them to do that?
Buyer consult.
Meet
office.
So we need to set an
Appointment.
appointment, right? Because remember, prospecting by definition is the task of getting an appointment, period. That's it. It's not designed to handle objections. It's not designed to be going down presentations and leading people down paths. The only purpose of prospecting is to generate an appointment. That's true for buyers and sellers, okay? So we're in the same process. Now we set the appointment, now what? We might have some pre-appointment stuff, right? Kind of like we do with the sellers, with the pre-qualification script. We might do some pre-appointment stuff. Then we might do some actual appointment, right? And that's where we're going to do a presentation. And what else might we do at the appointment itself, much like we do at a listing appointment? We get an agency agreement signed, right? As the largest real estate brokerage in the country, do we use standard agency agreements or do we use our own? We use our own. So you got to remember that. In Forms Pro, you're going to find the GAR agency agreements, but you'll also find the Coldwell Banker ones. And so you want to use the Coldwell Banker ones, okay? What else might we do in this process? What are some other things? Let's go kind of random out of order. Well, no, let's keep going. After the appointment, what are we going to do after the appointment? More than likely.
Well, understand the client's needs.
Okay, so we need to understand needs. I'm going to put that somewhere in here. Because that can happen kind of along the way. What's the next thing after we meet with them, wherever we meet with them, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but where might we go after that?
Researching properties.
We might need to do some research, okay.
Pre-qualify for mortgages.
We need to do some pre-qualification, and that might be out of order, but okay. What else? What's the main thing you do with a buyer? Show them houses. Thank you. Show property. After you've shown property, what else do you do?
Go from there, making decisions.
Okay.
Get feedback from those properties because sometimes what they think they want is not really what they want until they go and actually look. a lot of times their ideas of what they want changed.
They don't know what they want
No,
from the beginning?
no.
Really? All right. So we get some feedback, we show some property, we get some more feedback, we show some more property, we get some feedback, we show some more property. 3 months, 6 months, a year later, we get some feedback, we show some more property. Keith, I love buyers. This is why it's taken us to week 30, whatever, 31 here to get back to buyers. At some point,
Pull the trigger.
You have
we're
to-
going to pull the trigger, and what are we going to do?
Make offers.
We're going to make an offer, right? Now, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like in our contract coverage in this session, we covered succinctly the process of the contract as far as writing the contract, counter offers, and all that sort of thing. Does everybody pretty much agree with that? Okay, good. So then we are going to stop right there, because the last week we did the what happens once you get under contract and get to close, right? And we talked about all the inspections, and we talked about being on both sides,
Right.
depending on what we were doing. So once we get to the make an offer stand, we're already covered. So we just got to get through this stuff here. Think we can do all that today?
No.
Maybe. We'll see. But it takes less than 9 sessions. All right. So let's talk about, we also have covered the getting the buyer and prospecting stuff pretty completely, multiple times, different classes, open houses, different things, right? So we can kind of do that. Let's talk about the appointment. Where should we have the appointment?
Here.
So what's the most common call or conversation that you have with a potential buyer? Somebody give me a real world example of the last time they met a buyer or talked to a buyer for the first time.
Well, oftentimes they have something in mind that they want to take a look at.
Right, so we have a property that they've already inquired about. And for us, whether it's e-lead or call-in or walk-in or off of your signed call or whatever, a lot of times the first point of contact with a potential buyer is in reference to a specific property, right? And so the great debate in real estate is, well, if they call in on 123 Main Street, shouldn't I go show them 123 Main Street? Who thinks we should go show them 123 Main Street? Well, in some
Eventually.
situations, absolutely. Okay?
Well, it
I'm kind of
depends.
begging to differ.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You don't wanna show them a property that they can't afford, and you don't know what they can afford just because you've seen their lovely face. So-
Absolutely. And you haven't seen their face yet because they're probably on the phone or via email. And so are you going to go meet somebody that you've never met before at a vacant house, whether somebody occupies it or not? When you go show it, it's vacant, right? At a vacant house in whatever part of town, doesn't matter, good, bad, or indifferent, by yourself?
As long as you let someone know where you are, and if you feel okay about it, it's a
You
judgment
can.
call.
It's a judgment call.
I do it all the time.
I'm
I
going to
know, I
say
think I'm thinking about
that
it.
generally speaking, that's not the best choice.
I know.
Okay? So what we need to work on is really the hardest part of the hardest part of this process is getting the prospect to getting them into an appointment. And where would we prefer the appointment to be?
Here.
Here, right? In the office, in this room, big screen, right? Because that allows them to be in a professional environment. It allows you to control the environment. It's a much safer environment because all of us are here. And so you get, see who they are, get their information, all that sort of thing.
You could also kind of introduce them to the concept that this is a process. It's
Absolutely.
not a go look at a house and look at a house. There's a process to it. And if you start with step one, I think it's then getting them in here lets them know, okay, there's more steps I'm thinking about already.
Absolutely.
And also, I think it gives, not that people don't know this about Coldwell Banker anyway, but that there's a lot of people behind the scenes. It's not just you and me.
Correct.
There's all those other people
Yep.
that they're gonna see coming in and out. And,
Well, I mean, there's a reason why there's all this stuff on the wall in this
Yeah.
room. It's designed to try and create an environment of professionalism and support
Yeah.
and all of the services and things that we offer. You know, I mean, that's part of the process. Now, the interesting thing in real estate is none of you would go show a house or go stand in a house that was trying to be sold without having done a presentation for that person and getting a listing agreement, right? Like you wouldn't start marketing a property for sale without having met with them, done a presentation, and gotten a signed agency agreement, right?
Right.
So why would you do that with a buyer? Because that's basically what you're doing. You're agreeing to jump to the work part of the job long before we have the connection and legal document part of the job that we would need for a seller. Now, a lot of people say, well, but with a seller, legally, we can't market that property without a listing agreement. Guess what? Legally, you can't advise a buyer without an agency agreement either. So you need to tell people that. Now, are there agents that will go show property? And I mean, all the way through, even there are, believe it or not, there are agents out there that will write offers without having a buyer brokerage agreement in place. Horrible, right?
But you know what?
But
It
they
works
do
for some people, and I mean, having that conversation.
But it works.
To protect them
But
now.
here's
Too.
the issue. At some point, they're going to get bitten because they're violating the law, literally. Literally, because you can't write an offer for somebody without advising them. I challenge anybody to do that. And that's the threshold. That's the line. The line between customer and client is professional advice. And so if you write an offer for somebody, you have given them professional advice. I guarantee it. Now, if you treat them as a customer and you just fill in the blanks, but again, I will challenge you that if you have not presented them with a customer acknowledgement and gone through the ABCs of agency and all of that, when you go to write that offer and they think they're a customer, you're still going to advise them.
Is that true of all types of sales, whether it's a short sale or a foreclosure? So if you're the agent
Doesn't matter.
writing a short sale offer, you still need that.
That's right.
Just the person I've been talking to you about, turns out they never signed an agreement with that person.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Happens all the
I
time.
just thought maybe because it was a short
I mean,
sale.
here's the problem with our industry.
Mhm.
I'm going to rant just for a second. Fast forward. Yeah, no, Rob, you can't comment because I know you have some personal experience that's been challenging lately. The problem with our industry is that agents don't treat this like a job. If you went to work for a pharmaceutical sales company and they required a disclosure to be signed before you could discuss a certain new drug with a doctor, would you discuss the drug with the doctor without having the disclosure signed? But why do we do this? Well, because we didn't used to do buyer brokerage. So here's the history of the problem with this, is once upon a time, there was only seller representation, right?
Yeah.
And so this concept that I now represent the buyer in a transaction is actually totally new for some people. It's a change in their business model. And so for them, they still operate on the old model of, well, I mean, it's my listing, and so I'm going to write a contract for you and get it done, because that's my job, is to get this property sold. Which is true, except according to current law, you need to make sure that that person that you're writing the contract for understands who you represent. You need to make sure that the person you're writing the contract for understands what types of agency are available by law, in this case here in Georgia, right? So
That's, I think, a great way to explain it to a client because of the legal part of it. I remember the first time I showed a buyer, I was afraid to get him to sign. And then when I asked them to sign, they said, "You don't trust me?" And it was a very awkward moment.
Uh-huh.
But I think that if you explain to them the legality of advising them, it's pretty easy. To me
So-
now, anyway.
So we're going to get to the whole buyer brokerage thing in a second, but let's for a minute work on the how do we get them to the appointment, because the buyer brokerage should not come up prior to some point during the appointment. Okay. So how do we get that person that calls in and says, you know, hey, I want to see 123 Main Street. Will you come show it to me? What could we say to them?
Let's get together first.
I'd love to show it to you. Why don't you come into the office? Let's talk about what your needs are, and let's see what we can do about getting you in there at a time that meets the seller's needs
Okay,
and yours.
I always bring up safety. I do.
nothing wrong with that.
I say, you know, I would love to work with you. If we haven't met yet, and for safety reasons, it's important that I meet you face to face before I show you any property. And then we go from there. And,
Okay.
and I've said that several times about, especially it's been in the news recently, so nobody has shot me down once I say that. Once I say, as a, you know, a way to protect each of us, we need to meet each other and, you know, get to know each other a little better, and so I can also find out what you need or what you're looking for.
You can say each of us, but they know you mean you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, whatever.
They just-
Trust themselves.
I mean, they know who they are. They know that you, which is fine, because I think that's not a bad segue to say, you know, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but, you know, there have been some incidents recently where realtors were, you know, put into bad positions and from a safety standpoint, personal security. And so as a rule, my personal policy is that I always meet potential buyers that I work with first at my office. So, you know, what time might work for you? Today at 2 o'clock or tomorrow at 1? Right? Similar script, does it sound like?
Yeah.
At the end there, that close is the same, comes from something else, doesn't it? So we have to be able to utilize those scripts and make them work for us in every situation. Now, here's the thing I want to caution you about. If and I'm going to be try to be creative here, but I probably won't be. If my name is Bob Smith and you as a female think, oh, well, that's a guy, so I'm going to make sure I meet him at the office. If my name is Leslie and I'm a 20-something-year-old, just recently graduated college, and you don't feel scared and you choose to meet me at the property, you've just violated fair housing.
Well, you never know who they're going to bring with them
That's
anyway.
true.
That's true too, right? I mean, there's the
Sometimes it's a
ever-present scam of
It's the
the
whole clan.
damsel in distress on the side of the road that looks innocent enough, except for the fact that there are 3 guys in the bushes next to them. So, you know, you got to be careful, and from a fair housing standpoint, you have to be fair to everyone.
Yeah.
So if your policy is that you don't meet buyers for the first time at a property, you always meet them at the office, that's a great policy. But make sure you do it consistently to everyone
Right.
that inquires and you talk to. Because the first time you make an exception, you've broken the law. That's a violation of fair housing. That's not okay.
And if you
That-
think
and
in
that's-
terms of you're scared of everyone, meaning you don't know anyone.
Be afraid of everyone.
Be afraid of
right?
everyone,
That's-
then it'll be a habit.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why before I let anyone, I've met a couple of potential buyers at properties. Before I let them into the property, I photographed their IDs. I said, listen, this is a matter of safety and security. People know where I am. They know when to check with me. And in order to be sure that we're both comfortable with each other, for my sake as well as for yours, I need to take a photograph of your driver's license.
And
And
you can pull
nobody-
that off.
Nobody has ever said no.
Of course not.
All 3 of them.
Because again, when you bring up safety and security, it's the same, you know, it's hard to look somebody in the face and say, especially there, because you're face to face, it's hard to look you in the face and say, I don't care about your personal security, but I need you to work for me as a professional. Wait, what?
Yeah.
You know, like, that's not going to go over well. You know, the interesting thing about people is if you're honest with them and you tell them the truth, that this is a security issue, this is a legal issue, I can't advise you about things, I can't work with you unless I feel secure, and in order to do that, I need to meet with you first at the office. Or in your case, your comfort level is I need to get a picture of your ID so I can send it back, and that way somebody knows who I was with. And that's fine if
You
that's
send
your
it back
level,
or you just
your
leave it on your
threshold.
No, I take a photo and I've sent them to
He sends
Brad.
them to me, yeah, which is fine. And that's,
Goes along with.
and that's,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, that's just a level of security, you know, and everybody has a different threshold, you know, I mean, each of us as an agent feels safe doing different things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know agents that work REO business that go check properties in the middle of really bad areas of town by themselves that are maybe vacant to check for the bank. There's a high level of risk there.
Yeah.
But most of the agents that I know anyway, they wouldn't do it if they didn't feel safe doing it, right? And so you have to choose what you feel comfortable with. And I tell you to lean on the side of be afraid of everyone because it will make you safer in the long run. The other thing that it accomplishes is that it now gets us this appointment, right? Because that gets us the appointment, the ability to now have the appointment. So, anything else about getting the appointment set? Any other obstacles that you might run into?
Distance, I guess if the,
Yes, if they're from out of state.
Okay, so they're out of state. If there was a seller that was trying to sell a property down the street, but they were physically out of state, how would you handle that?
Conference call.
Conference call, video chat, right? So if you have a potential buyer that's out of state and they're interested in a particular property, how would you handle an appointment?
Same way.
Same way, set up an appointment to do a video conference.
well,
Okay.
if they're not technologically savvy.
Then you gotta do them over the phone and do the best you can.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, we have to be flexible, but the reality is the same, that when they do finally get here physically, you're going to meet them here. Or, here's the other side. Okay, let's say we're in Dunwoody, but the person calls and is interested in a house in Midtown, or condo in Midtown. Well, there are houses in Midtown too.
More condos.
Would you meet them here, or would you meet them at the Midtown office? You can meet them in the Midtown office, right? And most of the offices, all you have to do is call, and they'll reserve a conference room for you.
What about if it's after hours though?
The after hours gets a little tricky because if there's not staff there, there's nobody to officially let you in. So here's where knowing agents at different offices comes in handy. Because, for instance, we know Bob is pretty much always here. So agents that know Bob will come in and say, Bob, I got to come in at like 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Are you going to be there? Yeah, I'll be here. I'll let you in. Okay, great. Now, different offices have their own policies about how they handle that. But typically, if you can get an agent to work with you and know that they're going to be there for something else, then they'll let you in. That's fine.
Then there's always Starbucks.
That's what I was
I was
thinking.
about to say, I didn't.
There is always
It's not-
Starbucks.
it's not optimal.
It's not optimal, but it's better than a vacant house.
Or a vacant office, really.
Well, a vacant office, yeah, although very rarely is a real estate office actually vacant.
No, after
Well,
hours.
and I've met a couple times at Barnes and Noble because it's quieter than Starbucks, and also it's easier to get a table.
Panera is also a big one because, you know, a place like that that's more of a restaurant style. I mean, I went into Panera at Loman's yesterday, I think. And I mean, it was packed wall to wall. And only half the people were eating.
Right, right.
Everybody else was either there doing business or working on homework or whatever. And I'm like, God, how do these people make any money? Like, all their tables are full of people not eating. But yeah, anyway. So, you know, other options, you know. And so, depending on what part of town, you know, it's always good to have kind of a backup option like that you can work through and meet. That's a good place. All right, so we got the appointment. We're going to have the appointment here. Let's talk about the pre-appointment. What pre-appointment stuff might we do? So let's correlate for a second to a listing appointment. What do we do prior to a listing appointment that would be considered pre-appointment work?
It's your authority. But in this case, can you go forward asking them about finances?
So we're going to do a pre-qualification, right? So we're going to do a similar pre-qualification to what we do with listings. We're going to do with a buyer. We're going to ask them those sorts of questions. Have you gotten a pre-approval from a lender yet? how do you plan on purchasing the property? If I want to send you a list to give me detailed information, what would you send them?
Sorry, I just.
Buyer questionnaire.
The buyer questionnaire, yes. So you could send them the buyer questionnaire. And that way they can answer all of those questions about what they're looking for. All right? So the pre-appointment is going to be the pre-qual, or pre-approval actually, and the questionnaire. Right? Why do we want to send them that ahead of time?
To get them thinking and to let them know we're serious too.
Because, right, is it good for us if we come in and we sit down at the table and I say, Bobby, here's the questionnaire. Will you fill that out for me? Okay, come on now, get on it. What's taking you so long? Right?
Yeah.
That's not an environment we want to be in. We want them to have time to process it and work through it. What else, depending on how long of a time frame? So between this step and this step, in listings, we want a day or two, right? Because that gives us time to process everything, do our whole process. How about with buyers?
A couple hours.
Might be a couple hours because they might want to go see something tonight and they've called you this morning.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Tell them to call Lisa immediately.
Need you to call. Right. So we got to get this stuff going now, right? I want to send you a questionnaire because I want to start to look. I know you're calling about a specific property, but I'd like to get an idea of what about this property is what you're looking for and make sure that it is everything that you're looking for, and that there might be some other options that I can find that might work with that. We need to get you pre-approved because no seller wants to deal with somebody that doesn't have financing in place. And we need to get you, I need to get time to make sure that that property is available to see tonight, right? So sometimes that's your route. Sometimes it's an appointment only, sometimes it's a 24 hours call before show, whatever. And so that's going to mean, we meet tonight, but we're going to go see the property tomorrow.
That pre-approval is also good because a lot of times people think they can afford more than they can. And so that's sort of their first wake-up call. It's because you think you can do this, but on paper you can't, especially with all the newer regulations.
So how would you get me to do a pre-approval? If I say to you, I want to go see a $500,000 house, what are you going to say to me?
Well, and I've got one client now that I said this to. I said, a lot of the listings don't accept offers now without a pre-approval letter.
Okay.
Or proof of funds. So you need to go ahead and get the ball rolling so that you have that in your hand so that we are ready.
I just want to go see the house.
Well, if anybody who's going to want to show their house wants to know that they're dealing with a serious buyer. And unless and until we can make that representation to them that you are a serious buyer, it's not appropriate for us to see anything yet.
Okay, I'm going to call somebody else that'll let me in.
Okay.
Or gotta be willing to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You just like the seller that says, well, I want $500,000 for my $300,000 house. You can't get me that?
This is the hardest part, though, for me. Not to ask for it, but to just dog them over and over and over again. Have you done the pre-approval? Have you called Lisa yet? Have you called your mortgage person yet? And one of the ones, we closed the deal, but literally it took forever for them to do that for me. They just, they knew that they had a big chunk of money in their account. They weren't worried about getting pre-approved because they knew what they had and they didn't care if anybody else knew.
And so did you start the rest of the process?
Well,
without that?
This is a friend of mine. So
Okay.
This is a little different.
No, it's not. Fair housing says that it's your friend, it doesn't matter.
I asked and I asked and I asked and I sent email after email after email and I even gave her a list of people that I had used. In case you don't have anybody, why don't you call these people? Short of, and like I said, I ended up with a sale, so I'm glad I didn't say hit the high road, but.
Well, but think about it this way. what was she saying to you in the process by not going out and doing that? At least what do I think she was saying to you? Read my mind.
She wasn't ready.
She's not ready.
I'm afraid I'm not.
She's
gonna
not in
get
a hurry.
approved.
She's not ready to roll. Or there's a fear factor there.
Yeah, then I'm not gonna
Okay.
get approved.
And I want to go see the house and make sure this is what I want to do before I
Yeah.
get out there and do that.
Then there's a third option, they don't want to tell their friends what they have.
That is very true in
Yeah.
a friend situation.
Yeah, she was a coworker, so.
They don't want you to know their financials.
Mhm.
And so there's a couple of ways to work around it.
Call Lisa.
One of the ways is to say, my partner, Coldwell Banker Home Loans, they do more loans than most anyone else that's not a bank. So they're very good at what they do. And what I'd like you to do is reach out to them. But to make it easier for you, can I get your permission to give her, Lisa, our local person, your phone number? She'll call you and set up a time that'll work good for you when you guys can spend about 15 minutes just going over everything. Does that work for you? That's setting it, that's making it easier for them, right? But it's also connecting it with
Yeah.
trying to get it proactive, and it's giving Lisa somebody to chase and dog, not you.
Right.
But it also, but what you can also do is simply say, well, look, I don't need to know any of your financials. That's all between you and the mortgage bank.
And that's the next step that you have to say, especially when you're talking about your partner. Just because they're my partner, privacy laws prevent them from sharing any of your financial information with me. All they're going to do is tell me what you qualify for, which I need to know to be able to sell you a house. So I'm going to know how much the house is that you buy because we're going to work together. But as far as the details of your finances, your credit report, all that stuff, I'm never going to see any of that stuff. I don't want to see any of that stuff because that's your information. So all I'm going to know is you were approved to buy a $450,000 house. So that means that's what we're going to go out and look at. Okay? So help them feel comfortable with that process. What about the infamous, I have pre-approval from Jimmy John's Speedy Mortgage. I already got mine.
You love Jimmy
May I
Johnson.
see- may I have a
I
copy of the
actually do
letter?
like Jimmy John.
Give me a
Okay.
copy of the letter, and then I'm gonna call the mortgage bank and say, is this something that's approved, and what's the approval for?
What if it's an approval with someone that you've worked with multiple times that's just viciously horrible?
Still the same process.
At what point do you tell them about your past experience?
You know,
You don't, do you? Can you?
So here's the reality. If you don't have an agency agreement with them, would that fall under advice? And so we probably don't want to do that. But once we get an agency agreement, as long as we're not bashing someone else, but we can share factual information that might help them make an educated decision, can we do that?
sure.
Yeah, sure. Because we're not violating any antitrust or any fair housing or anything like that by saying Bank of America is very slow the last couple of times. Last couple of loans I did with them, we really had some issues with getting the appraisals ordered, and it caused a lot of stress. So make sure that you stay on top of them for that. Okay. Or if you like, you might want to get a second opinion from Lisa because she's really good. In the last couple of transactions I've done with her, everything's been really smooth and the stress level's been a lot lower.
And the other thing you can always tell them is what's been in the news lately. A lot of people are leaving money on the table by taking mortgages at higher points than they should.
That's right.
So if you take some other options, at least you know you're an educated consumer.
Yes, definitely. Definitely worth talking about, especially with Coldwell Banker Home Loans, because the no origination points is huge in most people. All right, so that gets us the pre-approval, that gets us the questionnaire. Anything else we need to do before the appointment? Confirm the appointment, whatever. Anything else that we could do, depending on how long it is? If it's, if they call you on a Tuesday and we can't meet until Saturday, maybe we start sending them some properties.
Yeah.
Get me that questionnaire back. I'm going to set up some searches and get you some other properties to kind of look at so that we can work together remotely and try to get a little bit of information kind of up and running before we get together on Saturday. And then that way we'll have some other properties to go out and look at so we can send them properties.
also have all the agreements pre-printed.
We can also send them, you know, the brochures, things like that, you know, the what to know when you're buying a home. If they're looking at condos, the new condo one.
Yeah.
The lead paint, the mold, flood.
Right.
You know, because these are things that, you know, especially if it's going to be a week almost, you might say, you know, okay, so today I need you to read, I would love for you to read this. So, you know, we got 3 days between now and when we get together. I'm going to have a new brochure for you to read each day that will help make you as educated as possible so that you make your best choice in purchasing a home. Does that work for you? Great. I don't want to overwhelm you and send you all at the same time, but I'll send you one each day. Does that work? No, go ahead and send them all to me. Okay, great. I'll send them all to you. It's their call.
I mean, I include the closing one as well. So
Sure.
all the way to the end, assuming we find something that you like and you want to buy, this is what you can expect at the end as well.
Because much like with the listing process, what do we do with the listing process? We drop off the pre-listing book, right? If they read the whole pre-listing book, how hard is your presentation? Not very, right? So if you can provide the buyer with all of this information prior to the presentation, how hard is the presentation? Not very, right? Same concept of providing them with the buyer brokerage prior to the presentation. Because the number one easy way out of any agreement, I need to go home and review this. Okay, great. Well, we're not going to see any houses. Wait, what? Here, I gave it to you. Please review it before you come, because we'll need to sign this before, and we'll review it, but we'll need to sign this before we go out. Okay? So, just, you know, from that process. All right, where are we on time here?
And I had, my very first client was uncomfortable with signing it. And so what we did on that first time we went out, I said, let's just sign it for 24 hours. Let's
Perfect.
do it 24 hour. And then if you feel comfortable with me, then we can make it a longer period of time. And that's what we did. And at the end of the day, he said, do you have another brokerage agreement? I want to change the dates.
Perfect.
So, I mean, it worked.
And so so we got about 15 minutes left. Let's do the how do we deal with the agency agreement, okay? Because there's a presentation, and what I'd like to do is before next week, spend some time kind of figuring out what you think the buyer presentation should look like. And next week we're gonna look at some options for a buyer presentation, formal presentations, okay? But let's talk about that agency agreement. Let's talk about, like what Kate said, the script. You know, that's a perfect one. If I don't want to sign it, well, in order to go out and show these houses today, I need to be able to be in an agreement with you just for the time that we're out today. Would it be all right if we do one just for one day?
Does that make sense?
And then at the end of that one day, you know, we can decide that we like working together, we want to move forward, or not. And then we'll, you know, we'll wish each other the best and move on. Does that work? Okay? That's kind of the nice thing about buyer brokerage versus listing. You know, listing you can do short, but one day is not enough, obviously. You know, hey, I want to do a one-day one for Sunday because I want to hold an open house in your house. That's weird. You know,
I work for a FISBO.
but it might work for a FISBO. That's not a bad idea, actually. So from that standpoint, you know, we have to try to find ways to make them feel comfortable. Investors, for example, investors are not going to sign a blanket buyer brokerage with you unless you are best friends and they're never going to use anybody else. Because they're probably working with 5 or 10 different agents at any given time if they're really good professional investors. So what would you recommend that you do in a buyer brokerage agreement that would make an investor comfortable with signing it to be able to work with you?
Make it a shorter term.
You can make it a shorter term, or
Blanket one.
Specifics of the property.
you can make it property specific. You can say that this buyer brokerage in the special steps pertains only to 123, 125, and 128 Main Street. Period. Now, here's the beauty. As Kate's example was, at the end of her showing that afternoon, they said, you know, we really want to go back and change the date. So you can go back, line through the date, put the new date 3 months out, 6 months out, whatever, more normal, have everybody initial the time and date it, you're good to go. Same thing is true of the property specific one. So you might say on the attached list, and then you can add other properties and just initial those and date and time them to add them into the buyer brokerage agreement. So you have to sometimes be flexible to work with people on what they feel comfortable with, but you also need to be firm on what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Now, here's what you have to be careful not to do. You don't want to present it as, you know, I need you to sign this because it's the only thing that guarantees I get paid. Now, for some people, that might work, but for most people, it's probably going to turn them off, right? Because their job is to not make sure you get paid. That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to be buyers and do their thing.
Usually until they get what they want.
And so, you know, a lot of times they're looking for free whatever. It is very important that you explain to a buyer that the properties that you show them, you will work out to ensure that they are, when they're listed, you're already being offered a cooperative fee, right? But what happens if you put in the listing agreement 3.5%, I mean in the buyer brokerage agreement 3.5%, and the listing agreement only offers you 2%? Who pays that other 1.5%? Buyer does. Now, here's the reality. When you sit down with a buyer, you need to be careful of saying, well, don't worry about it, the seller pays me anyway. Because what happens is you come across that for sale by owner, you come across that pre-market, you come across that listed property that they're only paying you 1.5%, and your buyer brokerage is for 3.5%. You've now told your buyer, well, don't worry about it, the seller pays it. Well, seller's not paying it now. Now what are you going to do?
So I have a question. So you go through that at the presentation and you talk about it and they understand it and they say to you, well, that's fine, but in that case, I don't want to look at any properties unless it says on the listing that the seller's going to pay you your 3%.
So what would you do if somebody says that to you?
Well, that's not lawful,
It is lawful.
is it?
Buyer's choice.
Okay, buyer's choice. Okay.
Buyer can say, I don't want to see any properties that don't overlook crack houses.
Okay.
It's a very weird example.
I would
don't know
say
where
to
that came
them,
from.
to answer your question, I would say to them, I understand your perspective on this. However, you need to understand that there will be good properties out there that might be distressed properties or other that where the commission is lower. That's the nature of that sort of market. So you just need to understand that you will be limiting what you can look at.
Fine with me. I don't want to have to pay you on top of what they pay you. So just show me stuff that meets your buyer brokerage 3%. Is that okay?
Okay.
So how do you back that up?
Oh, okay.
Special step.
I'm only going to show you houses.
Because if you don't have it in writing that they said, do not show me any properties that do not offer 3% compensation to you, and they come back later and say, well, they never showed me this house because I don't know why they didn't show it to me.
Okay.
Because you told me. No, I wouldn't have told you that.
Would you do that in the same situation if they say, I want to look in Gwinnett, but I do not want to look in these 2 zip codes because, you know, would you do that too to cover yourself or
You
not?
could, but from a standpoint of offering them searches and things,
Mhm.
finding property like that is kind of, I mean, it's public information and all the properties
Okay.
are listed. So
So
I'm
it's
not
not
as
important.
worried about that aspect of it. It's when it starts tying into your commission
Okay.
that it starts to be you're manipulating the situation. Because my favorite comment, most frustrating comment, is when I hear an agent say, oh, I don't show properties that only offer 2% co-ops. Really? So you violate the law? Because that's a violation of the law.
Mhm.
Now, if your client says to you, don't show me properties that don't offer you full commission because I don't want to pay you anything extra, that's different.
Yeah.
Very few people actually say that.
Okay.
Now, the other reality is if you do the presentation in such a way that they understand the value of what you're offering, when you go through your buyer brokerage, it's going to be much like the listing process, right? When you get to that commission paragraph, they already see all that you bring to the table that is above and beyond what they're going to get out from anybody else. They're happy to say, yeah, I'm fine with paying 3.5%. Okay, great. Now here's the good news. The good news is the seller's probably going to pay most of that most of the time.
Mhm.
If you set that expectation, you're now in control of your commission instead of someone else. Because one of the problems with working with buyers, if you don't do that, is if the listing agent was not a strong listing agent and they took a 5% commission, 2.5% on each side, or some of them will take 3% on their side and give you 2%. Because the marketing is harder and costs more money. Now you've brought a buyer, you work with a buyer, you're only going to get paid 2%. What are you going to do about it? This is what you're going to do about it. You're going to set the expectation with the buyer. You're going to have them work that process. Now, if you talk to experienced agents, if there were too many experienced top producing agents in here, you know what they'd say? It's not worth it. I'm just going to do it this way because I don't want to lose the client.
Hmm.
You know what they do every day?
Swallow commission.
They leave money on the table. Because they don't
care.
they don't feel like they have the power to do it. You know why they don't think that? I know agents, they get in a situation and they sit down and they're going through and they've shown properties and they say to the buyer says, you know, I really like that one. I think that's the one. I think we should make an offer. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you, Mary. Let's get to work on that. There's just one thing I need to bring up real quick. You know, remember back in our buyer presentation, we did the buyer brokerage and we signed it. It said 3.5% is what I get paid. Unfortunately, the seller here is only offering, and the listing agent is only offering to pay me a 2.5% commission. And they stop talking. What do you think happens?
They get paid 2.5% commission.
Nope. The buyer says, the buyer breaks the silence at some point, depending on how strong they are, or sooner or later, they break the silence and they say, so that extra percent, I have to pay that? That's what our contract or buyer brokerage says, yes. Now,
More
a
silence.
lot of times they will say, and that's why they put 3.5 on the buyer brokerage, because then they will say, since it's such a big difference, a full percent, how about we do this? I'll come down 0.5%, you go up 0.5%, and we'll meet at 3%. Now what just happened? They got their full 3%, which full 3.5 from my standpoint. But another reason why I don't do buyers.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. So-
And there's plenty of them out there.
Y'all have at them. No, I mean it's good. I mean buyers can be very beneficial. I know a lot of agents that have been very, very successful doing a lot of buyers. At some point, you will realize the time effort for buyers compared to the time effort for sellers. Your return on your investment is night and day. And so, you know, you'll stop chasing buyers around, and the buyers that you work with will be ones that you kind of cherry pick, and the others you'll pass out to those of you that are new.
I know it's almost time to go, but I have a meeting this afternoon with a buyer. So what can we say that sets us apart from the other brokerages as far as what we do as buyers agents?
Okay, I can answer that in like 2 minutes. You remember the Coldwell Banker top 10?
Okay,
I'd start with that
okay,
because that's huge, buyer or seller.
okay.
Okay. The other thing I would talk about is I would talk about our partnerships with Wiseman, our partnerships with Coldwell Banker Home Loans, our ethics with however many years we've been voted one of the most ethical companies in the country, our professionalism, our support,
Okay.
the experience that you bring to the table, not just as you, but with me and everyone else behind you. I knew that's where you're going with that.
Really?
But as a brand new agent, you can talk about the fact that you bring experience to the table. In a prior life, you did negotiation for a living,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Happened to be with ones about yay tall.
Well, no, normally it was ones your
Most of the time it was parents, right?
Yes,
Exactly. Right?
usually,
That's
yeah.
true. So we parents are always the problem. But those are skills that you're going to use in
Okay.
people skills. I've worked with people all my career, and so this is the skill set that I bring to the table to help make sure that this is a process that works for you. My interest, now here's the statement that you can say that very few agents actually say, is when we are in an agency agreement, where Bobby, you and I are tied together legally, my responsibility is your fiduciary best interest. Not mine, yours. And so that means I'm going to get you the best deal on the best property that fits your needs. Now, that might be significantly less than what your top range is. And I know a lot of agents that if you told them you could buy a $300,000 house, they're going to show you anything under $250,000. But what if I could find you a house for $200,000 that meets your needs and gives you everything you need, and now you're buying a $200,000 house instead of a $300,000 house? Does that work for you? Yeah, reality is probably not going to be able to do that. But I'm going to try. Because the reality is that the market is tight with good inventory, and it's going to be hard for us to do that. But the difference is I'm going to be looking for it, even though it's going to cost me money for you to buy a cheaper house. I'm still going to put you in the best deal for you. Does that work for you?
Okay. Thank you.
Is that different than anything you've ever heard from an agent before? Probably. Because most agents, if I'm qualified for $500,000 house, I'm going to show you 500, 550, right? I'm going to max that out. Because my job is to get myself as much commission as possible, right?
I've heard from 3 friends that have bought houses, and obviously no broker, agent ever told them that. And all 3 of them felt like they got hosed because they didn't feel like their agent was fighting for them for price.
Here's the other thing that having that conversation early at an initial meeting sets the right tone for your relationship with that client. Because if you wait until you're in the negotiation on a particular property and they feel like you're just trying to get the deal closed and you're really not looking out for their best interests, how likely are they to refer you to somebody else? Not very, right? But if they feel like you're in there and you're right there beside them fighting tooth and nail, doing it the way it needs to be done, getting them everything you can get them, then they're going to be really happy no matter what happens.
And that also applies to if they want to pull you down on the buyer brokerage agreement on your commission. I'm fighting this hard for me. I fight this hard for you.
That's right. That's right. The classic, and that we use that on sellers all the time, works on buyers too. If you work with somebody that's willing to just do it for less money and take less commission, give away their money, how easy do you think it's going to be for them to give away your money?
Yeah.
Well, as a representative for your fiduciary interest as a buyer, I'm not going to give away any of your money that I don't have to. If I can get an extra $1,000, I'm going to get you an extra $1,000 because that's in your best interest, and that's my job.
And you can also be transparent with them. You can say, The more you understand how much I'm gonna fight for you, you're gonna wanna do business with me again, and I want your referrals.
That's right. I want you to walk out of this transaction completely satisfied that I have fought as hard as possible, that there isn't anyone that could have done a better job for you. And you know why? Because I want you to tell your friends how hard I fought for you. I don't want you to tell your friends that I was a discount broker and I just cut you a deal. Because that's not the way I work. I earn my money. I guarantee you you'll believe me when we get to the end of this transaction. All right, so next time we're going to look at buyer presentation itself, the actual presentation. So do some looking, get out there and find some options that you might be able to find for yourself, and then we'll go from there. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.